Hey folks, I wanted to do an update on fluoride. This is Dr. Gerstmar at Aspire Natural Health. If you hadn't seen it, we'll link to it here. But I did an Ask Me Anything about water fluoridation. Now, that was a topic I frankly still don't know a great deal about, but I am aware that in general, kind of the alternative providers are against water fluoridation. It's never something I'd done much research on. So I did some quick research, and bottom line is this. Fluoride is a naturally occurring trace mineral. It's important in bone and teeth formation, and the studies that are out there suggest that at a public health level, right, so as big blocks of people, that water fluoridation seems to help prevent cavities, especially in poorer kids, and that taking away seems to increase cavities, right? So it seemed that on balance, it's pretty beneficial. So that's what I came out talking about. So just recently, I saw in my feeds study pop up saying, "Oh, look, fluoride is classified as a neurotoxin," and some pretty smart people in my feeds were putting out that article. So I decided, man, did I make a mistake? Do I need to revise my viewpoint? So I went and looked at it, and I want to have a couple of comments here about that. So the first thing, we need to be careful, right? In our thinking, we can swing too far to one side or the other. So when you first look at a website, the first thing you have to say is, does this website seem reputable? And again, we need to be careful about falling into one side or the other, because there's the logical fallacy of appealing to authority. Well, this website is a big, popular, conventional, mainstream, solid website, therefore it must be true, right? So that is not right, although the more reputable, the more reasonable, the more mainstream, the more solid that website is, it does factor in, but we have to be sure not to over bias it and say, well, just because it said this. So for example, this study, it says, well, the world's oldest, most prestigious medical journal, The Lancet, said this, right? They're using that to bolster their argument. Now, the fact that it appears in the Lancet, hey, that's great, that needs to be factored in. But if we just say, well, just because it appeared in the Lancet, therefore it must be true, we've committed a logical fallacy of appealing to authority, right? Now, we have to be careful that we don't do the exact opposite as well and say, well, just because it's on kind of a shifty looking website, we can automatically, without having to look at it at all, just toss it out, right? So when researching this a little bit, clicking through some of these websites, I came upon all these different, websites against fluoride with some kind of goofy names, to be honest with you. And my first thought was, ugh. But we have to be careful here that we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? Or as they say, don't shoot the messenger for the message. So someone very disreputable can be saying something, but what they're saying could actually be true. So we have to be careful when we're looking at things. And this is the trouble with the internet, right? There is lots of fantastic information out there, and there's lots of garbage out there. And it can be really difficult for people to tell the difference between the two. Or having, an educated background on some of this stuff is really helpful to me, and there's no absolute easy way that I can give this all to you so that you can more critically evaluate things. So we do our best here. So the first is, look, when you're clicking on something, take a look at the website. Does it seem reputable? Does it seem knowledgeable? Is it, kind of solid and prestigious, if you will? That doesn't automatically mean you need to accept whatever is put on there, but if it's kind of slapped together, it looks really questionable, there's really not much there, again, that doesn't mean you automatically can discount it, but you have to take it with a bigger grain of salt, right? So that's the first thing. Then we take a look at the website and we start clicking in. And the first thing, I notice is there's a lot of reference back to other blog posts on the website or to other kind of questionable looking websites. Again, we're doing the math here, trying not to over-under bias. But the reality, look, is if we end up in a circle where we just have a website referring to a website, referring to a website, an article, referencing support for that article in just another article again and again and again and around and around and around, so that there's really nothing substantive that's linked to, this is a problem, right? It's the classic telephone game where someone says something and someone else repeats it and someone else repeats it, and sort of, we end up talking a lot about nothing without really any proof. So we have to be careful when we go to, a lot of people are savvy now, both in a good way and a bad way, that there's a need a lot of time to have references, right? And so they'll put in links. The reality is you look and they know most people will look and just do an easy scan, and if there's a list of references, we automatically tick off the box and going, great, this person must know what they're talking about, they've got references. And this is where the reality is, none of us have all day to chase down every single one of these references, then read the references, see if they're relevant. The problem is people are either not checking their references sometimes, or they're straight up trying to deceive, and so they're throwing in lots of references. And when you go, and this isn't just confined to bloggers, right? We've seen this in actual scientific papers that are put out there, that there's junk references in there, and you go and you click on it and you find that this study referenced has no bearing whatsoever on what the person is talking about. So this may sound kind of depressing, but it goes back again to the fact of we have to kind of hone in on some reasonable sources that we do trust, that again seem reasonable, and at least spot check every once in a while, right? When you read something, can you go and find some collaborating or some backup evidence that suggests that's true, or can you once in a while find some evidence that suggests that it's not true, right? Again, we have to be careful of confirmation bias, which is, I believe this, therefore I'm going to go seek out all the evidence that I can find that proves that this is true, while ignoring the evidence that says that it's not, right? And as human beings, every single one of us, no matter what our viewpoint is susceptible to confirmation bias. So we have to be careful here. Okay, so the first thing, when we see something put out there on the internet, we can go to the website and we can take a look at it and we say, hey, does this seem a reasonable website, right? Then we can kind of look at the links and references that are in there and say, does this seem reasonable, or are we just in this kind of never-ending game of telephone without really linking to anything substantive, right? And then if it's an especially kind of controversial, unusual viewpoint, we need to at least spot check and go check a few of these references, right? Or have someone who's knowledgeable go and check these references and see, does this make sense, right? Okay, and then the next point is, look, again, kind of, is what is put out there matching what's said? So we look and we see, and the bottom line is, this comes down to a piece that was put out in the Lancet that classified fluoride as a neurotoxin. Right, so I went and looked at the paper in the Lancet at fluoride as a neurotoxin, and they're putting out there that yes, because the Lancet said here fluoride is a neurotoxin, therefore fluoride is terrible and we should take it out of our water supply completely. So we went and looked, and yes, fluoride is a neurotoxin, right? And that's fair, but here's the deal, right? There's an old saying that says the dose makes the poison. So anything, if given in truly excessive amounts, I mean, I know you'll have heard this, right? Water is toxic if you take way too much, if you drowned in it, right? Or you drink way too much of it. Oxygen is toxic if you have way too much of it. Anything is toxic. Now, that's not saying, look, there are some poisons, things that in minuscule doses, cyanide, for example, is still incredibly toxic. Right? There's some things that seem to have no beneficial amount that can be taken, or they never do anything really positive for the system. So we do have bona fide poisons. But in the case of fluoride, it seems, and this is what I came to last time, that there is a safe, reasonable dose, and then there is very much a toxic dose. And this neurotoxin thing seems to fit in just with that fluoride given in excessive amounts is toxic to the brain, especially of kids. Does that mean we should never use fluoride? No. Does that mean we do have to be careful? Yes. And as I mentioned last time in the report, there was some indication that if people are getting a lot of fluoride from other sources, for example, the Irish in this study were getting a lot of fluoride from drinking tea, and then you add fluoridated water on top of it, it's pushing people into those toxic zones. Can that be a real issue? Absolutely it can. right? Then there was another study that I looked at that I hadn't included where they did a survey of water fluoridation in India, in the city, and they found it was very irregular. Some areas, despite them adding fluoride to the water, some areas had very low levels and some areas had very high levels. And so what they concluded that it was inconsistent. So is this possibly an issue? Well, absolutely, right? If you're going to fluoridate the water, you need to do it correctly. We need to get it so that it's pretty much consistent in all the water in all the areas that are being serviced. Real issue? Yes, right? But just because something can be toxic doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. It means that it needs to be, administered correctly. So the bottom line here is we get this study that says fluoride is a neurotoxin. That seems to be true. Does this then automatically follow that fluoride should be yanked from water? No. Well, even in this blog post that I was looking at, they suggested that we'd be better off having dentists topically apply a little bit of fluoride to kids' teeth instead of trying to hit everyone by putting it in the water. As I said in that last vlog, right, or the AMA, I don't think for individuals that water fluoridation is the best choice, right? There's much more that we can do that can strengthen teeth and prevent cavities than just trying to rely on fluoride. Diet being the single biggest impact for people, right? But again, this is where we have to differentiate between public health, which is just saying, hey, this big group of people, what is the best choice for this big group of people that gives ideally here, right, the most benefit for the least cost. And water fluoridation seems to fit within that. Now we can talk about, again, some other shady aspects of it, but from a public health perspective. But here's the thing. It's important to realize as individuals, what works for the group may not work for you. Right? So when we're talking about as a group, is water fluoridation helpful? It seems to be the answer is yes. If it's done correctly, if it's controlled properly, so that people aren't overdosing on fluoride and causing issues. But as an individual, should we, you and I, rely on fluoridation to help protect us from cavities? And my answer is no. Right? Good dental care, absolutely. Maybe having some fluoride applied topically to the teeth while the kid is in the dentist chair makes a sensible choice. But correct diet and some of these other factors that we talked about last time are far and away more important, because the bottom line is this. Look, we see these native tribes of people. They don't have any dentists, they don't brush their teeth, and they rarely, if ever, have cavities. Now, when something goes wrong for them, right, bad news. We're glad we have dentists around. But we have to understand that the primary thing driving tooth decay is not whether or not you go to the dentist, right? It's your daily habits, and especially it's what are you eating? All right, so I wanted to cover a few pieces. When I saw this study, I immediately had to jump on this and say, did I make a mistake? Do I need to retract my previous recommendations? It says, you know what? I know many alternative providers are against water fluoridation, but so far I haven't seen the evidence for it. In this little episode here, I hope I've given you at least some clues on evaluating what you're looking at the internet. So we talked about checking out the website itself. Does it seem reasonably reputable? Checking out the article itself, right? Are the references, the things linked to in the study, do they actually lead somewhere substantial, or are they just linking around? Are they quoting a blog post which is quoting a blog post which is quoting a blog post which is pulling, the information out of thin air? Or are they linking to something substantive? And then the third piece is, okay, even if they're linking to something substantial, are they using it in the right context? So fluoride, neurotoxin, yes. Does that mean always in any dose a neurotoxin? It does not. All right, guys, I hope this has been helpful for you. If we can help you, please contact us. It's www.aspirenaturalhealth.com or facebook.com aspirenaturalhealth. Again, we focus on treating people with gut problems, autoimmune diseases, and other hard-to-treat cases. We don't give up on people. We'd be happy to talk with you and see if we're the right choice for you. Until next time, take care.